Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
I am Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things quizzical and trollical part, 6 or 7 or something? I've kind of lost track. Another little or mountainous climb into the trolls, because they don't necessarily live in water like they described you. So we have distant Trollmoots of the Delaris Mountains after we get to some emails. So if you have any questions for us like these people do, give us a shout at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Literally, title it shout. I don't care. We'll take them all. All are good. So we have our first one, I believe, from Matthew. Matthew actually kind of has a two-parter. He wrote in and then wrote it in again to tell us about it. So then he has some questions. So let's read the first part. Hello, Josh and Dan. I am hoping to get some information. I'm hoping to get some clarification about Haven. My group is about to start on a new campaign, and I was looking at doing the Legends of Earthdawn series. In between adventures, I was looking at the first edition adventures to help make a fuller campaign. While reading it, seems like the political landscape is much different than what it was in first edition. Is it because time has passed and Torgak is losing power and other groups are filling that void, like Loster's Lawbringers replacing Torgak's deputies, and Prestigious Order of Gardeners replacing the people Torgak used to hire for that role? Or do all the groups still exist amidst it in the new material? Or is this just how Earthdawn 4th Edition is handling Haven and it has always been this way? Thank you for clearing up my confusion. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this subject. I also look forward to sending in more questions as I read more. Follow-up. Hello to the both of you. I just got done reading the history section in Legends of Barsave. All of my questions that I asked have been answered. And yet, even though my understanding is more, it brought up some new questions. The history gave me the impression that Loster's Lawbringers and Torgak's deputies do the same job. If this is so, who is the last word in law? Can they arrest each other? If one group is investigating a crime, does the other group stay out of their way? Is it like Bartertown, where one group patrols one section and the other group patrols the other section?
I don't know that there's a specific answer to that, actually. That's a question, actually, that I probably should have sent to Kyle prior to this, but this email just arrived earlier today, so I haven't had a chance. My feeling would be that whatever seems to work best would probably be the way to go. And I realize that's not much of an answer, but broadly speaking, the adventuring companies that were introduced as part of the Legends of Barsave campaign setup are newer groups that were introduced in part to have organizations that the player characters could work with and to provide some structure that the overall story could revolve around. But for the most part, the other factions and groups that were present in Haven are still there.
Oh, the Delvers.
The unaffiliated explorers, whatever their actual name is. The Loyal Order of Delvers, that's another one. Yeah, those groups are still there.
I think you're right.
The UAE, AUE, the Association of Unaffiliated Explorers, I think is what it's called. They're the ones that are not great. They're not fans of Torgak's because the Loyal Order of Delvers are kind of his crew. That is another political aspect that is present in the community. I think the way that I would handle it is to have Loster's Lawbringers acting as more of a supplement to Torgak's police force, whatever they're called. But you could also have it slanted that the presence of Loster's Lawbringers and the things that they are doing in Haven as kind of a patrol/police force type of thing is one of the reasons why Torgak's position is weakening or is being perceived as weak by some of the other organizations and factions within Haven. It's not a big focus of the campaign, at least the first half of it, but there is a sort of undercurrent and thread going on in the Legends of Barsave campaign that is relating to the political situation within Haven and the possibility that depending on who they ally with and what information they give to which factions could result in a more drastic change when it comes to the future of the community. Because it is several years after the par-length box set, Torghak is even older, and it is getting to the point where really the questions of what shape is the community going to be looking at from a political standpoint in the not too distant future, and the various factions that are kind of jockeying and vying for positions of power within that community. I think whatever kind of situation you want to present will probably work out fine. Imagine a situation where Torghak's deputies and Loster's lawbringers maybe work together a little bit. I could also imagine situations where they each have their designated areas, and that border between them maybe have a source of friction, and it could be that they are a little bit more at loggerheads with each other.
Yeah.
I don't expect that there's really a lot of real investigatory stuff that's going on. The idea of police forces being detectives and whatnot is a relatively modern invention. And what you're looking at in the case of the deputies and Loster's lawbringers is really just, more of a city guard kind of keeping the peace, breaking up fights, driving off hazards, rather than your house got broken into and things were stolen. Well, let's check that out. I don't think that's something really that either of those factions are particularly interested in. But if there is a situation that one of them might investigate, I imagine that they would investigate it and mete out whatever justice or judgment that they deem necessary. I don't know, there's a lot of area and a lot of space that you could play with the political situation in Haven that really isn't explored in a whole lot of depth in terms of the adventures that are written for the first half of Legends of Barsave.
Fair. All right, we got a couple emails from Nick. Now, if this name rings a bell to you, go check out your copy of the Vasgothia book, which you should have by now. Just saying.
And we had him on the show a while back.
Yes. Yes, we did. Nick was delightful. Hi, Dan and Josh. I just got through listening to the Giftbringer and Ubir episode. I loved it, especially because Giftbringer is my favorite horror to use, and I'm also a Stephen King fan. This is less a question and more a recommendation. As Josh said, King movies tend to be a mixed bag, but my absolute favorite is a film called Silver Bullet, an adaptation of a lesser-known King novelette graphic novel called The Cycle of the Werewolf. By the way, fantastic Bernie writes and artwork in that if you don't own it.
Yes.
It's got a great cast, Gary Busey, Corey Haim, and Everett McGill. Maybe it's the nostalgia goggles, but I honestly love this film, and I recommend it to any Stephen King werewolf fan. Anyway, loving the horror and Trollmoot podcasts. Keep up the good work. Nick.
Yeah, so the best Stephen King adaptations generally are from his shorter works, because they are easier to adapt to a film and not lose out a lot of stuff. Cycle of the Werewolf is, if I'm recalling correctly, was originally conceived as a calendar, that the pieces of art that go with each chapter of that story were supposed to be like the picture that goes with a month on a calendar, and then the story kind of came along with them. But it is a relatively short piece. In a similar way that Stand By Me is a fantastic adaptation of The Body, which is a Stephen King novella.
From Dance Macabre, the best Stephen King movie ever.
Then you also have The Shawshank Redemption, which is an adaptation of Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption. And then you've also got The Green Mile, which is again adapted from a sort of relatively shorter King work.
Yep.
So, yeah, his shorter stuff does tend to end up as better adaptations.
Yeah, agreed.
But, yeah, The Cycle of the Werewolf is one of the lesser-known ones, and it is pretty cool. I don't actually remember whether I have a copy of that or not now offhand.
Back to Nick. In addition to the last email I just sent, I do have a Giftbringer story. I ran a one-shot game for 3 of my players. The group were 10th Circle, Air Sailor, Beastmaster, and Wizard. I used Giftbringer for the story, and we had a great time with the whole investigation side of it. I had the group come across a town that had been destroyed by the horror before they came across another settlement where it had just started its MO. When the group finally confronted it, Giftbringer erupted into its true form and flew away. My plan was to have it retreat to a nearby vacant care, and the group would then need to track it down and kill it. This did not happen, however. The Wendling wizard in the group, played by my wife, Bex, seized upon this opportunity to cast the velocity spell at the horror. This caused a wound, and Giftbringer then failed his knockdown test, sending it plummeting back to the earth. The Beastmaster then leapt on top of the horror before it could recover, and proceeded to tunnel a hole through it with his claw frenzy talent, killing it in 1 round. Not the game I had planned, but to this day my players still talk about this moment fondly. Sometimes it's the story you didn't anticipate that creates the best memories. Nick.
Wow. Knockdown step of 15. I just pulled up Giftbringer's stats there from first edition. In first edition, that is a D20 D6. So failing the roll is certainly not unexpected. Or I don't find that unbelievable. Especially with hypervelocity, which I seem to recall is a spell in first edition that did some pretty heinous damage.
Yeah.
Now I want to go look that up. Hold on. That was pretty sure in the companion. Nope. Oh, no, you know what? I bet it was in...
Magic.
No, I bet it... Well, Magic didn't really have much in the way of spells in it. I bet it was in Arcane Mysteries.
Thank you. I always get those two confused. I always look up Magic first thinking the spells are in there in my book. Haven't retrained my brain, ever.
No?
Are you looking for hypervelocity or just velocity?
Hypervelocity. Anyway, yes, great story, Nick. I think you might have mentioned that on the Discord as well, because I kind of remember that story.
On to our distant Trollmoots section of this episode. We're going to talk about the Trollmoots that are found in the Delaris Mountains. So on your map, the Delaris Mountains are furthest to the west of the Twilight Peaks, literally over the Liège River, just a little bit north of the Twilight Peaks as well. South of the Liège jungle, as I get my map straight in my brain. So, Delaris Mountains actually comes from the elven words Delara, which means quiet and serene. So, it's the Delaris Mountains. These are the quiet mountains. The interesting thing, mountains, there are no bird calls you can hear. There are no echoes in the canyons. There are no animal noises whatsoever. So these are clean, peaceful, kind of eerily quiet mountains and woods that you can get into in the forests in there. And if you have a party in there, you'll notice that the voices don't carry quite as far in the Delaris Mountains as they would anywhere else. There are multiple life rocks in the Delaris Mountains as well, just for some features to point out. And this is where the Fellowship of Night is located. Somewhere in the Delaris Mountains. Game Masters, pick your point. Lock it down. Put it wherever you want.
The other feature of the Delaris Mountains is that it is, according to legend, the location of the monastery/refuge that Elianar Messias, retreated to after he was banished from Wormwood prior to the Scourge, and where the Books of Harrow were allegedly located.
So that's a nice little feature to put in there somewhere if you possibly can. So we've got 2 moots there. You want to start on the west or the east? How do you want to do
Whichever
this?
one. I mean, let's take them in the order that they're in the book.
I don't even remember how they are in the book anymore.
The Rockhorns are the first ones listed.
Right.
I believe they are the ones that are on the eastern side, sort of the Delaris Mountains.
You are correct, sir. I think the order that they put them in is kind of like westward expansion. So start in the east and work your way west, kind of like the founding of America. So yes, the Rockhorn Moot is on the eastern side. This is the more peaceful moot than any of the Twilight Peak moots, as we're going to find, because Twilight Peak moots are, they're a thing. The Rockhorn Moot was founded before the Orichalcum Wars, and they have befriended the obsidimen in the area. So they've kind of merged those cultures together as well. Taking a cue from the obsidimen, they are more thoughtful, more peaceful, and they take more time, so they're not as quick to act. They do have an affinity. The Rockhorn Moot has an affinity for the earth spirits and the elemental. So a completely different take, again, on a troll moot, just not based in the Twilight Peaks. This is across the river and up a couple of slopes or so. They do raid northward into Jairus, and they also raid east into the Bloodlords and the Blackfangs, so that's going to be a fun time. And they raid south into Carafad, because, while you're there, why not? So, initial thoughts on the Rockhorn clan.
When we get to these Delaris moots, there isn't as much information on them. They are not so much of a focus of the book, they are given a little bit less of a development than the other moots that we've talked about. But the Rockhorns have that close relationship with the obsidimen, and the way that that influences their culture, and the way that those two communities have sort of worked together over the centuries and sort of exchanged the various strengths, where the trolls would help protect the Liferocks and the rich elemental nodes and such that could be found there, while the obsidimen, more placid, thoughtful, meditative culture has kind of influenced and mellowed the raider style. And especially as we are getting further afield from the heart of Highland troll culture, the more that's sort of being modified. The interesting thing is that because of their relationship with the Liferock, with the obsidimen that are in their area, they actually have a pretty strong reaction to Thera's landing of the Triumph on Ayodhya.
They took that one personally.
Yeah, they are taking it sort of a little bit more personally, and Omasu and the Liferock Rebellion have sort of made overtures to them to work together. And so there is some pretty strong feelings, and in a way, the Rockhorns would be a moot that is more easily drawn into attacks on Theron supply lines, or to help support the assault either on the Triumph or on Sky Point, because of that relationship that they have with the obsidimen and how that affects them. There's kind of a parallel a little bit there with the Stoneclaws, who have that kind of strong, long-standing relation with the dwarves, and whose culture has been modified a little bit by the presence of another culture that has sort of melded with them over the course of centuries. So there's an interesting kind of idea going on there, and the melding or the diversifying of troll culture and the way that things can change as a result of various influences.
Yeah, I love the fact that we get this dichotomy from I can say the smallest, but the second smallest race, dwarves, but most populous, mixed with the trolls in the Stoneclaws, as you said. And then the Rockhorn has merged, as you said, with the obsidimen, no S. And that also makes for just a broadening of the horizons for trolls. And so they've got these two different attitudes. And so they've got these kind of a dichotomous look from the Stoneclaws and then the Rockhorn across the river. So it's nicely done. The essays are very well done on both of these to broaden what you would think of as a traditional or non-traditional Trollmoot. And so I think it's just a nice thought experiment to flesh all these out the way that they've been done. So I see why Steve got, name on the front of the book. It's, well done, Steve.
Yeah. One of the other sort of aspects of the Rockhorns is the presence of the Fellowship of Night within the Delaris Mountains. The Rockhorns aren't really aware of them yet, but because of the Fellowship's experimentation on a dead Liferock, there is a strong impression here that if they were to find out about them, that they would take that as a grave insult. One of the aspects that the chief of the Rockhorns has taken the Theron insult, the Theron landing on Ayodhya, as an insult to racial honor in a way. That he's kind of taken on obsidimen as part of that family, that culture that is therefore part of his clans and his personal beliefs on honor, and therefore it is kind of an insult to that. And so if he were to learn about the Fellowship of Night and what they are doing, there is the potential that that could be a similar thing, and they are a lot more local, and he is a lot more likely to act against them in a way. And of course, that is compounded, and we talked a little bit about this when we did the Fellowship of Night episode back in our Secret Societies series, where the Therans are interested in dealing with the Fellowship of Night because the Fellowship of Night knows about life rocks and magic related to life rocks and stuff like that. And so the Therans are interested in what they might be able to learn from them because it might allow them to do even more to draw on the power of the Ayodhya life rock to strengthen the Triumph. Meanwhile, Omasu and the Life Rock Rebellion are also interested in perhaps dealing with the Fellowship of Night in order to learn what they know so that they could potentially liberate or free or communicate somehow with the life rock that is trapped below the fortress. And everybody is kind of pussyfooting around the Rockhorns because they're not exactly sure how they will react to the knowledge of this community. And the one thing that's said is that probably the only way that the Rockhorns are likely to react positively to the Fellowship of Night is if the Fellowship of Night actually presents them a way to free the Life Rock under the Triumph. And even then, that would likely be a strained relationship. But the situation with the Rockhorns and the Fellowship of Night is very clearly a source of stories or adventures that would connect with the broader threat and the broader story arc of the Theran presence at the Triumph and the Ayodhya life rock and everything that's kind of connected with that. Whereas the other moots that we have talked about in the Twilight Peaks all have kind of connections. There's none that's quite as direct as this one. The broader arc of the Twilight Peaks moots is that there is interest to bring them on board to go against the Therans, and some of them have reasons to do that, but others don't really have any kind of strong connection to that at all. I feel like the Rockhorns have the strongest direct connection to that whole storyline and the adventure hooks that can kind of be hung off of that arc.
I mean, I started off by saying the Rockhorns are more peaceful than these Twilight Peak moots, but that's kind of a low bar to clear.
Yeah.
So if they did find out about the Brotherhood of Night, what exactly would they do? So that this is kind of up to the leader, and the leader of the Rockhorn Moot is Cern Stonefriend Rockhorn, a 7th Circle elementalist who is also skilled as an air sailor and a warrior, but communes with earth and rock spirits. So yes, more peaceful than most Trollmoots in the Twilight Peaks. However, you got to take this into account. Still a troll.
Yes.
And since he has the Brotherhood with the obsidimen in the area, I think they'd take that a little personally. So I have a feeling it would be at the edge of sword point or at the threat of a spell, a certain spell, where it would be, hey, Brotherhood of Night, free the Ayodhya life rock and we'll let you live. And that's the only option you get. Because otherwise we'll do it without you. So I have a feeling that would be the ultimatum there. But that's just me. The other elder in the Rockhorn Moot is Feldasar, the actual little elder of the Obsidian Brotherhood of the Greenstone Liferock. And the Greenstone Liferock is actually a gigantic mass of dark jade.
Well, it resembles dark jade. It's not actually jade.
Fair.
But that's just what it looks like because, magic and stuff.
Yes, but I'll take any dark jade jewelry y'all want to send me. I'm okay with that. But Feldasar, the Elder, is a 9th Circle warrior. So also, these two in charge of this Rockhorn Moot, nothing to sneeze at.
Yes, and he is equally angry and upset about the situation with Ayodhya. In fact, Feldasar has visited Ayodhya himself, and it says that he had even traveled the pilgrimage route.
Yes.
And so there is even a more personal connection to this whole situation.
Mm-hmm. And that's just lovely toys to play with in the sandbox here, to Josh's point. You've got the Therans, and then you've got the other obsidimen with the Ayodhya, and then, all these things. So lovely political maneuvering going on there, and some relationships that could easily be fleshed out with a lot of role-playing. So what we've done with the other moots as well in the Twilight Peaks is to let you know the Rockhorn Moot is made up of 16 clans, and the Rockhorn clan obviously leads them. So you get 15 other clans you can name as you wish and create to go along with all of these Rockhorns. And they only have 8 Drakars that are lightly armed. So they are not as, like I said, they still raid, but they're not quite as forceful and they're not quite as well equipped as the other Moots. They still get the job done, because as I said, they raid the Bloodlords and the Blackfangs. They make it work.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the Rockhorns?
No, I think we've covered them pretty well.
Yeah, it's not a huge write-up, but it's an interesting write-up. I think it's like one page shorter than everybody else, but it was one of those fascinating ideas to have the trolls literally take Rock Brother seriously, because that's what they always call obsidimen, as Rock Brothers, and actually be brothers in a chosen family to all the obsidimen in the area. So I think that was a fantastic idea. Well done, Steve. On to the western part as we keep moving further away from Thrall. The Sky Seeker Moot is the closest Moot to Skypoint and Vivane. And the Sky Seeker Moot, oddly enough, I think due to proximity, doesn't exactly hate the Therans. They seek to gain from exploiting the Therans, and so they do raid the Therans, airship travel during Skypoint and Vivane heyday. But the origins of the Skyseeker Moot are hunters, farmers, and traders. And so they were, I think, lowland trolls before they got to the highland trolls, and then kind of kept those ideas in mind. So they raid less, but they hunt, they farm, they trade. And they do have a thread to Thera's origins, because they were cursed to always seek what they could not find. And they are aided by the Fellowship of Night.
So the monastery that Messias retreated to after being banished from Wormwood is located in Skyseeker territory.
Mm-hmm.
The Skyseekers had actually dealt with and traded with the monks and questors that resided there. They were devoted to Minbruges.
Yeah.
After learning of what Messias had found there, of the Books of Harrow, and recognizing sort of the value that they had, they started looking for other lost relics, other tomes of knowledge and things like that in order to profit themselves. Eventually, at least according to what's presented here, attacked the monastery where the Books of Harrow had been found and killed all the inhabitants, and the last surviving questors, the one that laid the curse upon them, they no longer know where it's located. The idea might be that if they redeemed themselves in some way, that they might regain their position or their fortunes. But broadly speaking, the Skyseekers are trying to remain neutral in the whole conflict that's going on between the Therans and Barsave at large, but the other Trollmoots in particular, in part because of their proximity to Vivane, because of where they were located. They weren't really hurt at all with the Battle of Sky Point, and because of the relatively positive, I mean, as far as such things are measured, relationship that they had with the Therans.
Yeah.
But there is a division, there is a debate, there is an internal discussion going on within the Moot about what's ultimately might happen and what they might need to do broadly, because they don't like the idea that the Therans broadly have of Highland trolls generally being dumb, stupid brutes, and that with the Theran desires for control and dominion, it is likely only a matter of time before they turn their attention to the Skyseekers. Whereas their other factions like, well, we've been doing just fine, and if we are nice to them and trade with them and don't overly raid or whatnot, then, maybe they'll leave us alone, because we really don't have anything to do with those crazy ones, over at the other end of the mountains there.
When has that ever worked? Therans don't leave anybody alone.
Part of that has to do with the fact that after the Scourge, the Skyseekers haven't really been able to reestablish the connections and the trade that they had enjoyed with the Therans prior.
Yeah.
And so that relationship is not as strong as it was beforehand. They did, like other Trollmoots, forego the actual rights of protection and passage. They did not take the Theran rights in that way. They hid away in their own mines and shelters and caves and whatnot. yet another example of peoples and cultures that survived the Scourge without needing to shackle themselves, pun mildly intended, to the Therans. In some cases, that was fine, and in other cases, like Bloodwood, it did not go so well.
Different methods had different outcomes.
Yeah, ultimately, the Skyseekers are working with the Fellowship of Night because of the Skyseekers' penchant for finding artifacts and lore and things like that that are of interest to that magical society. And the Skyseekers are hoping that perhaps the Fellowship of Night might be able to help break the curse that they are supposedly under.
Yeah.
And so there is a relationship that is developing there between them.
So the Skyseeker Moot is, I can't say run by, but the person in charge of it, the leader of it, is Cho'aras Brightstone Skyseeker. He's a quester of Minbruges, rank 5. This is, of course, first edition rules, but rank 5, and also a 7th Circle Sky Raider. The person in charge of the Skyseeker Moot is a human, Tana Lunar, leader of the Fellowship of Night, a 13th Circle Nethermancer. So also not to be messed with a whole lot. The Skyseeker Moot only raids to the north, really. They only go to Jairus, raid there, and then come back. But again, the curse of always seeking what they cannot find is kind of like the law of diminishing returns. They're going to keep finding less and less and less, and eventually have to change their ways. But that's further on down the road, and something for Cho'aras and Tana Lunar to figure out later on.
Yeah. Ultimately, with Cho'aras being a quester of Minbruges, he has been petitioning his patron Passion to find out how they might be able to redeem themselves, and has been getting cryptic visions and whatnot, but basically has come to believe that if they can find the monastery and rebuild it and rededicate it, that might reverse their fortunes in some way. And that is sort of the adventure hook, the adventure idea that is presented in this chapter as well, that maybe player characters, either in the course of dealing with the Fellowship of Night or trying to bring the Skyseekers on board as an ally in the coming war against the Therans. Again, this is talking about the post-Triumph, pre-Second War, that perhaps they could bring the Skyseekers or gain them as an ally by helping them resolve this curse or to locate the monastery.
Yeah.
And the monastery itself, even if you are not necessarily looking at a particular Skyseeker redemption arc, especially if you're looking at something that's post-Second War, you could say that perhaps the Skyseekers have not yet found what they're looking for. They haven't yet achieved it. That monastery, that location would be an incredible find for anybody as a historical site, as a legendary location. Just simply having that be the focus or goal of an arc or adventure where a player character group would need to end up in that area, and therefore dealing with the Skyseekers and the Fellowship of Night and the various things that are going on in the Delaris Mountains, just kind of gives you a situation to put them into. And we haven't really broken down or detailed any of the post-Second War situation in terms of how things might have changed, but that would be something that you could consider in terms of the relationship between the various moots and things that might have happened for a group that might be trying to track down this truly legendary locale.
Fair. I'm just curious what the 4th edition update would be to the Skyseeker Moot, since they primarily worked on the air traffic from Skypoint and Vivane. That's kind of what half of the rating is. Aside from Jairus, the other half would be from Skypoint. So since Skypoint and Vivane is no more in 4th edition, the timeline, I'm kind of curious how this would affect the Skyseeker Moot, but that's me.
There are a couple of different ways that you could spin that. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, but with that mention, there are a couple of possibilities.
None of this is official.
Yeah, none of this is official.
We're spitballing.
I see two different ways it could go with justifications either way. Option number one is with the loss of Vivane and Skypoint as a stronghold for Theran military might, it means that that area is a lot less well protected, and so therefore could actually be a little bit better raiding grounds for the Skyseekers. Because there are still, I mean, there are still people that live in the ruins of Vivane. There are still communities and things like that within that area, some of which is described in Empty Thrones, because some of what's going on there with that does deal with some of the Theron troops and forces that are still present in the region.
Yeah.
But it could be that the lack of a strong, definitive Theron military presence at Sky Point means that it's a lot easier, not only for the Skyseekers, but for other Trollmoots, maybe to range a little bit farther afield, where Carafad is not quite as nice a hunting ground as it might have been in the past, where Carafad is a little bit of a stronger nation. That area, Landis and the Vivane and Skypoint area, could be an area that actually is pretty attractive to the Delaris Moots as well as the Western Twilight Peaks. That's one option, as an area where they could have increased their activity and their ability to plunder, because there is not the strong Theron fleet there that could potentially cause them problems. The other option, of course, being that because there is not the strong Theron presence there, there is not as much trade activity, there is not as much caravans and merchant groups and things like that that are traveling the area, and thus the pickings might have reduced, which might make those moots that would be looking at that area come into greater conflict, as there are fewer resources for them to draw on in terms of successful raids and whatnot. You could go either way, and I think the way that you would choose would ultimately depend on what kind of story and what sort of mood you were trying to set for that.
I think those are both equally valid, and I'm kind of curious to see eventually when you get there.
For those of you listening at home, you can't see my face right now, but it is a weary face.
It is also a gigantic eye roll at me going, yeah, put it on the list. So
I have not made any secret of the fact that a revisited Skypoint / Vivane setting book to explore the changes to that area
is on the list of things to get done.
Is on the list of things that I would like to do, but we've got a Europa book to finish. We've got other stuff that is on the plate there. You can sort of see the basic framework of the stuff that I had in mind in the updates that I wrote for that area in the 4th edition GM's Guide. But here is the situation as I see it post-war, and there's a lot of potential hooks and situations that could be going on there.
Totally. So any further thoughts on these two moots? I think they are a nice broadening of the idea of what a Trollmoot could be. And one is location-based, Skyseeker, and their relationship to the Therons, and the other one is more relationship-based with the obsidimen, the Rockhorns. And I think these are, again, two more lovely facets of what a Trollmoot could possibly be. Now that we've, 8 of them in so far? 6 of them in? I don't know. I've lost count.
Yeah, and all of them, while they are in some ways recognizably Highland troll culture, they are all different takes and approaches based on the personalities of the leadership involved, based on the historical circumstances that they developed in and around. Again, breaking up that monoculture.
Yeah.
In the way that the Carafad book likewise gives a little bit more diversity and richness to what is broadly the sort of nomadic horse clans, so to speak, of the Orcish tribes, as well as the so-called city orcs that are settling in Wurchaz and causing tensions like that in that area. Yeah. It's really interesting. We got a similar kind of thing with the Serpent River houses, a diversity of Tiskrang, that they're, again, all kind of recognizable as different aspects of this same broader culture. The elves, we have to look a little bit farther afield to get that variety with the elves, because for the most part, we had the Bloodwood, and it's not until we explored and sort of gave greater definition to Shosara and the Western Kingdoms and Seriatha that we start to see a little bit of a diversity there and less of a monoculture. Thrall has its own sort of internal divisions. It is Thrallic culture, but there are political divisions and attitudes. The humans have never been a major part of the overall story arc.
Yeah.
There are different human ethnic groups, different human subcultures that exist that are described in the human chapter of the Denizens of Earthdawn book from first edition.
Yes.
But they're not anything that has ever been extensively explored beyond what's there, in part because there has not been an overarching or significant human political structure, political power. Landis, which was the sort of the human kingdom prior to the Scourge, collapsed.
Yeah.
And while there are a number of humans in that area still, it is a faded kingdom, and there's no strong presence the way that you have with the different Aropagoi or
the Moots and the Troll. Yeah.
The Orc nation of Carafod and the various subcultures there and things like that. Really, it's just fantastic, the diversity and interesting takes that are done with the trolls in this book, making them more than just the dumb brutes.
Agreed. I am enjoying all of this, as I haven't read it in 20 some odd years. So it's a nice refresher course just to go, oh, yes, there's more toys to play with in this sandbox of trolls, and plenty of personalities, plenty of situations, plenty of adventure idea and hooks. And then if none of those suit your tastes, pick a Trollmoot and just throw your players at them. But that's just me. So if you have any questions for us, folks, please feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. We will get to them. We'll read them on the air. We will answer your questions. So until next time, add the Delaris Mountain Moots to your legend.
Good night, everybody.